Hello, and welcome to another episode of me, Bob McIver, playing Braid. So last episode we finished up doing game design, and this episode we are doing art origin or something like that. Anyway, hey Rusted, how are you doing? Uh, Desktop audio, yeah, no, you can hear me fine, yeah. I'm sure you can. Let me just check here. Uh, Cool. I think we're all good to go. Alright, cool. Continue on to learn more about how Braid was made. I'm looking forward to this chapter. So let's do it. Cool. I think we're good. Oh yeah, and I suppose you guys need to see as well. Um, yep. So, what we got next? So visuals is next. So we've done all design. That seemed to be the biggest category. And now we've got visuals. Looking forward to this chapter. Done that one already. These are excerpts from an interview with Braid's primary visual artist, David Hellman, conducted by Frank Cifaldi of the Video Game History Foundation. We seem to have done through them already. Let's just go over them again.
What I would do was kind of work with one brush a lot of the time, and that changed a bit which one I was using, but I'd work with one brush that was like a round brush with a very simple shape, or maybe like a little bit of texture, a little bit of grain on it, or like sometimes I was using a brush with a canvas texture that a lot of people noticed in the original Braid. I'm using one brush and its opacity is set to like 60 to 75%. And as I go, I'm sampling with the eyedropper. So I'm sampling locally, painting transparently, and then sampling again. So I'm getting more subdivisions of color. And so that's kind of how I worked on it.
And when you revisited it, did you go back to your old techniques to make sure you were sort of being true to Braid, or did you have new techniques to come up with sort of similar aesthetics?
I think I did largely the same thing. I was working, actually, I did the new Braid art mostly in Procreate on my iPad,
Procreate.
which I was using for a long time. So a little bit different workflow, but yeah, very similar ultimately.
New brushstrokes effect for Anniversary Edition, which I think we've seen already.
Yeah, I think right away you can see something about our priorities with the new art, which was not to alter things in a meaningless way. So we came back to this with respect for the original decision making and original creative ideas. So it's recognizably like the same scene. I think if you were just shown the HD version, you might not even like think it's new until you compare directly. That's not true throughout the game. There are some eye-catching changes, but we definitely wanted to stay faithful here. But there's some new effects. We did find some new ways to express the idea of a living painting, a world whose creation is observable. You can see it's not just a world you receive without question as like some eternal thing that predates you. It's actually a thing that's coming into being live, and it's the painted nature of it suggests, you know, someone made this. The brushstrokes are very visible, and it has a personal feeling. So there are some brushstrokes here that are like drawing themselves across the sky or across the buildings. That's a new effect.
And this is a look you were trying to suggest in the original as well, right? That this is a world that's sort of being created. Is it just that you executed it better today?
Yeah, I think we had the chance to enhance that idea, to express that a little more fully. Probably in the old version, that concept of the world that's being created in front of your eyes lives more just in like the various degrees of abstraction that you see. Like some things are drawn in high detail, but there's a lot of things that move towards abstraction, larger brushstrokes, kind of breaking up into their component parts that are very obvious, that tell you this is a painting. This is not trying to make you forget that it's a painting. It's a place, it's a world, but it's also constructed. It's also like made up. So yeah, I think seeing those brushstrokes live does enhance that idea.
Alright, cool. Galleries. How do you get up there? Yeah, alright. Commentaries about visual art often contains many images, so provided a gallery mode that allows you to browse those images at your own pace.
Well, this is the beginning of the whole project for me. John was looking for an artist to add art to his game, Braid, which was already totally functional and kind of fully designed end to end, although it would change more over time. He was auditioning a lot of artists and sent screenshots of the stripped down programmer art, and my task was to paint over and decide what this might look like. I don't remember what direction he gave me at this point in time. Probably one of the first things he would have asked for is a very clear differentiation between foreground and background, because I remember that was a strong motif throughout. To me, it's really cool to see how wide open it was at this point. We have like a crystalline cave type of setting, kind of reminds me of Yoshi's Island. Then there's a sort of jungly stage. This one's interesting because it has silhouetted figures dancing. It reminds me of the beginning of Mulholland Drive, the credit sequence. But this is a kind of collage approach that I didn't use in Braid, but I'm kind of using a little bit now in my current project, in a sense.
I'm kind of getting Shadow of the Colossus out of this other one.
Oh yeah, the ruins.
Yeah.
Yeah, ruins and kind of misty hills. Yeah, it does have a Shadow of the Colossus atmosphere. I think the most interesting ones to me are the ones with the kind of pastel-like abstract backgrounds. They're probably abstract, but, you know, I still read them as physical spaces. Are these buildings? Are these stylized hills? I don't know, but there's a hazy atmosphere. There's light back there. There are free-floating color splotches, bright, saturated colors, and those are things that would end up in Braid, in spirit at least, in some form.
I find the last one interesting because...
With the autumn leaves?
Yeah, because moving autumn leaves were actually in John's programmer art, so this is something you might have observed somewhere in a build, maybe?
Definitely. I mean, I'm definitely at this point influenced by what I saw of the game. John had put falling leaves and other atmospheric elements already into the game. And there was actually some artwork done before me by, I don't know the names, but there was an art firm hired to do the art, which became unavailable, which is why John was looking again. But there was some art in there that was a kind of storybook illustration style, very different from what I ultimately did, but I think some of the flavor influenced me somehow, because that was my kind of total sense of what the flavor of the game was all these elements that were already present.
Cool. Oh, we get to see all of them now. The ones I already mentioned. Cool. Which one's your favourite? There's like quite different designs. Like the look of it is quite extreme from one to another. I think I like dancing people in the background for that, and the big strokes on that one. Colour palette's quite nice as well. So what, you got green and red, like contrasting colours. That one's also cool as well, like the platforms. That looks more like realistic as well. Like whereas this one you got abstract foam blocks. I think the final design's the best one to play now. Alright, what should we do? We'll do all these up here. Sunset and house.
I'm looking at the original screenshot of the first screen of Braid that John put together. I'm looking for the words because I can see all the elements that I adapted. I mean, we already have Tim in silhouette in front of a sunset. What may not be clear here is the sky is full of particles. They're just sort of simple, like fuzzy dot particles, but they're kind of scintillating and shimmering a little bit. There was already that idea of the sky moving with particles. And we have the controls giving you the basics of how you're going to begin to interact. I think I always found it a little unnatural that Tim was on a rooftop. I mean, people do sometimes have access to their rooftops in apartment buildings, but it felt a little too much like Spider-Man or something, especially because as you progress to the right, you fall off the rooftop. That kind of broke the immersion for me a little bit, so I reimagined that too, kind of being on a bridge and going down a staircase. Just kind of felt a little better to me. The strongest compositional element here is just that ground plane going across the screen that is supporting the idea that you're going to move to the right. And that's like the first building block of interaction here. The idea of a road ahead, of some unknown challenge and discovery ahead, and a character who we don't know yet, who we're going to invest in and maybe learn about ourselves through this whole thing. Reinterpreting this scene, I wanted to enhance that first impression, take it towards something really a little more bold and iconic. I think I was thinking consciously of iconic. You might say something's iconic because it's well known, but I think that's not the sense I could imagine at the time. Obviously, I was thinking iconic in terms of like bold, almost like very graphical, simplified. So like the figure there on the bridge, you know, you add the bridge with its particular shapes in front of a background that has a little more of an expressionistic character that just has some resonance to it. I don't know if I can explain it more, but I think turning the roof into a bridge was a good idea. I was imagining that when you finish the game, you would be in some kind of silhouette space with a kind of abstract expressionist background, and that the colors would become familiar yellows and oranges with these floating lights, and then maybe you fall off the end of a ladder into a space with a blue purple background, and you'd find yourself back at the beginning of the game with a purple, like a night sky, like after the sunset.
Oh, that's cool. I like that. What was ANX?
You might say something's iconic because it's well known, but I think that's not the sense I could imagine at the time. Obviously, I was thinking iconic in terms of like bold, almost like very graphical, simplified. So like
that's cool.
The figure there on the bridge, you know, you add the bridge with its particular shapes in front of a background that has a little more of an expressionistic character that just has some resonance to it. I don't know if I can explain it more, but I think turning the roof into a bridge.
Cool. Alright, let's go next one.
This just shows what the house looked like before I came to it. It was kind of more like a gallery. It looks very sparse. White walls and these picture frames are the main features. So not very home-like, more like a gallery. So we saw the very sparse gallery-like version of the house, and now the task was to make it feel like Tim's home. Each room has a painting, and each room has to convey its unique character and atmosphere, which support the themes and the ideas or feelings associated with the story in that world. There's also just the spatial challenge of fitting that much into one screen, because it is also kind of the status screen from which you can oversee your progress, how many puzzle pieces you've collected. I was tempted to include a staircase or something, which seems natural for a house. I put in ramps and things like that, but in the end, it was a lot better for efficiency to just have a single ladder. This is just a charmingly crude first concept for the upper room, the attic, from which you access the final world, and the ladder, whose pieces are assembled from each preceding world until you're able to climb the whole thing.
I mean, the difference I'm seeing is that there's an entire screen between screens in this version, because there's no attic in this screen.
That's true. It's a taller tower. If we'd done this, you wouldn't have any idea what's at the top of the tower until you got to climb the ladder. But instead, we show you the attic to kind of pique your curiosity. This is kind of cool to see because it's that first version John gave me. No walls between the rooms, it's just like a single space. There's 2 floors. This one is cool because it's very close to the original gallery-like layout. The space is dominated by these big picture frames, and there are no walls dividing the spaces up.
I'm getting more of an impression from this than I am from the game that Tim is an artist.
It does give that impression, very much, yeah. I mean, why would you have this kind of house with these giant picture frames otherwise? There's also an easel. This is just showing how the ladder is assembled and how I'm trying to create a kind of intuitive connection between completing the puzzles and getting access to the ladder segments. At one point, John had me try out these cables running between them, which looks very witnessy, actually.
Cables? What did these? I want to take a look at this. Okay. Where's all this leading me? So this is a separate door. Huh. Oh, cool. You actually get to see more stuff. So I suppose instead of like the ladders appearing, there's doors that are open. Yeah, like locked doors, maybe. Have a good stream. Thanks. Thanks, Austin. Are you often? Oh, cool. Didn't see that one as well. More color coded. And yeah, just get more like the final bit. Cool.
This just shows what the house looked like before I...
Back here. Alright, we go back to galleries. There's a door here and a door here.
So this is the world and story screen, also known as the clouds screen. It's the middle ground between Tim's house and the worlds he enters. And it's a moment of imaginative reorganization of things, of the world and its appearance and the laws governing time. In the original version that John showed me, he'd put in a photograph of clouds. Already had a good idea that he wanted clouds here. And yet he was open to me exploring. I brought in a kind of theatrical motif again. I guess the idea was Tim's house becomes some like theatrical set facades that could be wheeled away. In fact, they're abstracting into color shapes, and it's looking more like a painting. As you go to the right, the bright yellow and orange and blue, suggesting excitement, possibility, and like the waves down below, very abstracted, very iconic, suggesting washing away these set pieces, transformation, creative destruction, the chair hovering, the normal laws of nature being suspended or changed. I like this a lot, actually. I hoped we would use it, but John felt there was something lost, and he did humor me as I explored a series of revisions, introducing an outdoor nighttime element to this scene, then pushing the theatrical elements more to the outside and focusing more on the clouds and the moon, and finally arriving back at a bright daytime cloud scene. At the time when I was working on a nighttime cloud scene with this moon that looks a bit like a malevolent eye with a heavy cloud brow furrowed over it, I was also exploring the idea of having the world you're approaching kind of come at you three-dimensionally somehow, or maybe through successive scenes. The castle you're approaching gets closer and closer as the landscape evolves.
Oh, cool. She never understood her. Oh, okay, that's part of the story. Alright, let's take a look. Any new ones? What's at the background? What's going on in the background? There's like another level in the background. Oh, cool. You can see it come closer.
At the time when I was working on
Alright, cool. Have tried color studies.
I just like looking at these because it's the beginning. Everything is unformed. It's like the kind of first impulses, first ideas before they've taken shape.
Is this how your process goes typically?
I don't know about typically. I feel like it's been different each time, but I feel like this might have been my impulse to start this way on Braid. I mean, I was more immersed in painting at the time, painting as like a way of approaching, not just talking about physical materials, but painting distinguished from drawing, like drawing being more about line and painting being more about like color shapes and like adjacency of color areas and stuff. Yeah, I was trying to get feelings out of the color. I can really see it in the green one, the green with the white and the teal and the pink above. That really feels like World 2 to me. It's clearly like green being like a natural landscape, spring-like, beginning, fresh. The blue and the pink, bright and kind of childlike. And the light back there kind of encouraging and like beckoning and a warm and kind of safe feeling.
And then 3, is this more of the dark concept?
Yeah, well, I think it has a darkness to it. I don't know, I see like intense blue on that dark column. I mean, they're more representational things emerging. It's clearly a tree and bushes, but I don't know if that column is like a very large tree or something else, but it definitely has like a powerful thrust to it. It's dense, it's kind of rich, and then behind it, a contrasting gentleness and kind of playful light colors, motion, surprise, a little bit of magic coming into play. And then the fourth one, which is a black background with a kind of stone wall. I mean, there's stronger representational element with the stone, but definitely it feels colder. It feels quieter. It feels more distant. These shapes kind of sitting in some kind of balance. It's not as reassuring, I would say. Actually, this looks like a Zelda scene to me. It looks like a wooded area in Zelda 1 where there are a couple trees and you can like go north to the fairy fountain. It's very likely I was thinking about that. just because that's like very important to me. But I don't know. I guess the choice, I see like paths, if I'm thinking that way, different paths you can take, and there are two squares. So is that duality? I don't know if it's coming across very strongly, but I don't know. This is actually kind of a playful and fun atmosphere. It's not doesn't remind me a lot of the World 5 that's in the game, but I like how the white figure standing out against the color background with fairly subtle distinctions. They're all kind of close in value, but you have these hue shifts that are subtle. I mean, I worked a lot then with like just shifting hue around experimentally to see what would happen. I do have a kind of distant feeling here. These trees standing on their little islands, the oppressive, encroaching storm clouds, the trees being vivid, bright, self-contained in their roundness and like clustering together self-protectively. Maybe they're comfortable together but won't mix. I'm not sure. Yeah, I do feel an apprehensive feeling about this a little bit.
I feel a slowness having to go from one platform to the other.
Yeah.
It's a skew, which is very interesting.
It is a skew. It's all diagonals, and they're intersecting at this point that looks like kind of a crash, like an impact point. High contrast, black and white, things thrown to their opposites, and these kind of like bits of pink and orange jumping out in the crevices there where the fields are meeting. I don't know, feels like a hot friction or sparks or something. Definitely some kind of sharp impact.
Cool. What's your favourite one? They're all really cool. So I think I still prefer the first one. Good use of the texture brush, just like layering up. We'll do this one.
I think what's interesting is how the character of the game took form, and definitely I can talk about my intentions and what I was thinking and happy accidents and so on, but I'm also aware of how I joined a process that was already flowing and took influence. And I think that's kind of cool. That's kind of how things really come together. I don't know how to describe it. It's actually kind of hard to describe accurately. I was thinking about the artwork that was there before I joined the project, which was a kind of very incomplete, but some parts of the game had this storybook illustration style focused on like a forest environment. A lot of the trees and other things were really out of scale. They were like really big, and Tim was like really small within the environment. That original art wasn't super clear about what was solid ground and what was decorative, and there were kind of gaps and spaces between the trees, for example, that might have implied you could go over here, but you really couldn't. So what I tried to do was not that. I tried to really make it clear what was the play space and what was a solid thing or an inaccessible thing, not just because that's better for comprehension and puzzle solving, but because you can mislead and create kind of confused feeling if the player looks at the screen and thinks, can I get up there, and then has to go through a mental process of realizing that's only because the artist left it blank, or that's only decorative. I think there's like a dissonance between the game and the presentation that just feels kind of disappointing on some level.
Yeah, I see where he's getting at. Still looks cool though. Yeah, I really like this one. Really cool detail. And that's from the cover of the game as well. Oops, wrong button. Yeah, that's a completely different kind of field, ain't it? How long did it take to draw that day?
These are some early concepts I did, probably some of the earliest things I worked on before I was too deeply involved in any specific world or had created any usable assets yet. They're kind of a direct extension from the hiring test that I'd done. Even though this doesn't look like anything exactly that's in the game, I can tell which worlds these are related to, and I'm sure I was already taking some direction from John and aware of what kinds of environments would be present. The large figure in the background, it looks like a kind of topiary garden thing, and it's backlit, and there's the clouds above. Already I can tell this is World 1. This is the end of the game. There's no topiary stuff like that, no figures, but there are these trees trimmed into very inorganic shapes, circles and things, and a backlighting that creates, to me, it just has a mysterious feeling, or like a sense of something emerging. It could be the sunrise, it could be like the truth or some realization approaching you, something like that. But yeah, there was going to be an area late in the game that was very cultivated, had a sense of artificiality and some uncomfortable truth pushing through from behind. This one that's like a ruin with an orange tint clearly is related to World 4, which in the final game is a ruin with like an orange foreground. There were different color variations on this. I didn't include everything, but I used this one because it has a really bright, saturated background. I don't love it, but it does indicate the brightness that I would go for in a lot of cases, really saturated colors and like pushing the add blend mode to create bright light and bright colors. And then this last one has a kind of like pastoral feel, or like a village out in the hillside. Definitely feels like World 2 with the muscular rocks in the foreground and a sense of vitality, but also hopefulness and like gentleness in the hills. And there again are these like free-floating kind of dabs of color that would carry into the final game.
Cool. Oh, cool design. It's a nice parallaxing in the background. Yeah? World 2.
Where are you chronologically, game dev wise? Like you've passed the test.
I passed the test, I got hired, and we're going forward from the color studies. Actually, the background here is the background from one of the paint over hiring tests. That like pastel-y background with the notable bright pink sort of shape up there. The color palette's derived right out of that. And I remember early on I worked on a lot of grass and rocks. I spent a lot of time just painting large areas of grass, probably excessively. I think I was a little bit hung up on like, how do I do this? How am I painting? How am I working? I can tend to get overly self-conscious sometimes, but at the same time, you've got to set a baseline, and there's some process there. But I just was drawing many, many rocks, and there was kind of this repetition of a texture or a rhythm, and trying to bring in the right amount of the material qualities of like this pastel-like brush I was using, all digital work. Here's another one with that same background, a little bit of a hue adjustment, more grass and more of these rocks. Very, I guess like something I notice here is the darkness surrounding it, and it did become a motif that the foreground would kind of fade to darkness further from the playable space, further from the like gameplay surface, partly to kind of suggest a vignette effect and just draw your eye in towards the center of the screen. But something we talked about was trying to create some sense of something lurking, something undermining a little bit the cheerful feeling at the beginning of the game. One pitfall of using background elements this way to extend the foreground into space is you actually weaken the kind of immediate comprehension of the foreground. The squint test is really useful. If you squint, what do you see? And I think playing with the shapes this way does damage your clear perception of where you can stand and where the walls are, which we want to feel really immediate. We don't want the player to have to work too hard to parse any of that stuff. Now this is just kind of incrementing towards the actual level 2-1, with the actual assets that show up in the game. I'm doing more of that grass and more rocks, but you can recognize shapes that are eventually going to be in the game, including those steps you jump up right at the beginning, including the flowers and some of the particular rocks there in the foreground, and that wall on the far left that changes a bit in the final, but that's the first wall to the left of the door. And my workflow was to develop scenes like this as paintings and then break out individual parts. This is just another progression from the last scene, and I think this is looking very much like the game now. Here's like a complete concept for the feeling and the textures and the colors in World 2. The thing that really stands out to me is the kind of watery, liquidy background, the fragmentation of the leaves up in the tree into these blocky strokes that kind of merge then into the sky, the kind of halos of blue surrounding certain things like the tree just above the door, and the sense of atmosphere that is kind of permeating everything and fragmenting everything into a blue turquoise, and of course the sun, which looks kind of like when you're making over easy eggs and they break by accident. These are just some designs for specific elements within World 2. We've got the trellises, which are climbable surfaces, and there are a couple kind of fanciful ideas, and then a more conventional one, which is close to what was used in the game. I was trying something fanciful with these trees that are built like ladders somehow, or with the branches sort of. There's a kind of weird middle ground between something organic and something like highly artificial here. And I liked this, and I thought it would look cool with the leaves blowing around gently. But I guess it was sensible to go with a more conventional trellis that's like an identifiable thing. It has very clear edges as well, unlike one of the tree concepts, so you know where you can climb and where you can't. Gameplay clarity is really important. And we have some very hot-looking succulents throughout the game. There are spike hazards, and this is just kind of a drawing I liked of a thing that we did not use. Here's a tree that has a bunch of weird branches and shapes. It is in the game without some of those extensions, so you'll recognize that. But all these little, I guess the idea was it could be repurposed with all these add-ons, but I didn't do that. What this shows is the old art that preceded me mingled with the new art I was doing. Just kind of weird. Because John had hired somebody to do a bunch of art, and you can see the style here, this kind of storybook illustration style, these gnarled trees and mushrooms and everything, all kind of out of scale to Tim. Like look at the size of those mushrooms that Tim would step on off of that ladder. It's also funny to me that it's clearly underground. There are stalactites hanging. The bounds of this space are kind of suspended within the larger background. So in other words, the walls don't go off infinitely. You're kind of held within this strangely shaped chamber made up of this tree. Anyway, it's got an interesting character of its own, but my new stuff is sitting with it, and very discordantly, but I guess the game looked like this at one point.
Cool, I like the detail of the grass. It's just like a grass brush, texture brush. Really cool. So he wasn't drawing individual hairs, he had a brush that had multiple hairs at once, with multiple strands of grass. Getting ideas. I also liked, where was it? It was the tree he did. Yeah, so you got these dots all over the place. How was these dots done? Because it looks like he drew the tree normally, and then got another texture brush and drew on top maybe to create these, or maybe got an eraser with the dots and kind of just went over it to create a more like painterly style. Cool.
After finishing World 2, we moved right into World 3 with the notion that we could repurpose a lot of the World 2 stuff. So here you see World 2 with new World 3 stuff added into it. And I'm exploring what that might be. I mean, this is not what World 3 looks like. If anything, it looks like World 5 with like the wood carved things, like the carved columns and stuff like that. But I'm trying to figure out what it's going to look like to add more human-made objects into the scene, which is the progression through the worlds, more and more human-made stuff. Here's some more explorations of architectural styles. Again, that idea of what's it going to look like when we start adding stuff into what we have? What are these human-made things going to be? And they really vary, don't they? We've got some, I see stuff that shows up later. Like again, the wood with that kind of stained, moldy-looking surface does look like a World 5 thing. Within World 3, there's a progression from a sense of magical possibility and empowerment towards some feeling of danger and like negative implications or risky implications. Since we're in a forest, I thought we could have more and more kind of magical, enchanted forest plants that become weird. And I personally find like when things grow, it can be kind of disgusting. I don't know why. I have some kind of weird phobia of like, do you remember the Star Trek episode about the tribbles and there's like more and more of them? That's freaky, right? So that's how I feel about these things. These structures are actually based on a specific level layout in World 3, right at the beginning of a stage. And you've got a couple of moving like a moving wall and a moving platform. One thing I notice here is that the platforms have animals on them to indicate that they're moving. Like there's the one that moves horizontally is a horse, and the one that moves vertically is a bird. So there you go. This gives you a sense of the time I was spending painting all these dark trees.
Oh, that's really
I
cool.
do like how this looks. I like the palette. It feels really moody and cool. It's almost a shame that it wasn't in the game, but we'll get to that in a moment. This one, I like to draw light coming through the trees. There's a painting by Theodore Rousseau of a big dark forest, and it's almost all black. But if you stare at it, you'll see all the trees and all the logs on the ground, and there's a snake. And then you'll notice there's a little girl running away, trying to get out of the forest before the light's gone. And you can see just a little bit of light coming through the trees, just barely seeping through.
Why do you bring that painting up? Is that something that you're seeing as you look at your own?
I like that painting, and I think about it when I'm drawing forests. This one isn't as dark, but it has that aspect of light coming through. I guess I think a lot about light, the expressive nature of light, and light can be kind of hinting at something or beckoning or indicating there's something else beyond where you stand, and it makes me curious. It kind of begins to draw a contrast, like there's something out there. This is actually a screenshot of the game as it existed at a certain point with some new elements painted in. This is as far as we got with the Dark Forest for World 3. You can see the moody atmosphere, and you can see the plants on the ground that kind of look like, what's that kind of dog with that sort of, that looks like the end of a mop.
Like a Shih Tzu?
Sure. I was trying to create a plant that would be kind of cute and curious at first, but develop into something grotesque. There's that big one in the background on the right side with like many weird kind of bulbs or something within it. The idea was as you go along, it gets more oppressive and more weird. But this was just tonally far too abrupt a transition into darkness for the game. Like really, this was the point in development where John said, I think we need to ease people into this. There's more road ahead, and we've kind of like used it up already. So this world has to actually be more about sustaining that sense of possibility and hope and excitement from World 2, but just with just a little bit of danger, a little suggestion that all of this playing with the laws of time may have negative consequences, but we don't want to go too far yet.
Right, cool, let's see these. Yeah, those are the ones. Oh man, I really like these.
David mentioned doing an initial darker.
Yep, I think I'll get that. Let's go out a sec. Right, can I do this? No.
This is a piece of art that I actually used to prototype a lot of different palettes. I would adjust the hue of the foreground and background and adjust the brightness and try a lot of things out. But I can see here elements, again, of that puzzle area from World 3 that showed up in the previous concept art that had the horse and the bird. And these colors now are looking a lot like World 4 with the orange foreground and the distant blue hills in the background. Here I am exploring different color combinations. Again, the need to have a clear differentiation between foreground and background is always guiding us. I like to try things that are unconventional or seem weird or might not work or someone told me wouldn't work. So I might put blue in the foreground and orange in the background, even though the orange is going to come forward naturally, being a warmer color.
Yeah.
Eventually, that's what we do in World 4. It's got the orange foreground, distant blue background. I remember working on this, and I think I was like at a Panera Bread, and I might have taken my iMac and my Wacom tablet with me and plugged it in a booth. I think I did that one time. I was driving around my mom's minivan, so it wasn't, parking lot. You just lug the box in. That was life in those days, okay? Yeah, I actually really like this one, and it doesn't resemble anything in the game too much. I noticed the top right, some of those rocks that include like beige and browns and some grays and little hints of red. Looks familiar, like I think I took that out of one of the other earlier pieces of concept art for World 3. But I just really like the kind of subtlety of this one, and I think I'm often working with really vivid colors, but I really like the beiges, grays, greens, golds that are all pretty subtle with those hits of red. It looks like we've settled on a general direction for World 4, the orange foreground rocks and the distant pale blue background, and I'm just trying to figure out what those rocks are going to look like and trying out different rhythms and different styles. And I know I pulled a lot of concept art of rocks. What are rocks like? There's so many kinds. There are some really tight spaces in Braid where a key can go and a monster can go, but Tim cannot go. So we had to come up with some convention or some visual indicator that don't expect that you can go here, but we have to still show that it's a space that could be entered by something. I even have a version where there's sort of a sign that just shows the monster, indicating, I guess, monster only may enter. Trying different things out here. In some cases, we kind of went towards patterns or architectural elements that look like they block you, but not entirely. They look like they would prevent entry, but they're permeable to some extent.
Oh, cool. So that's the final one. Yeah, generally you want warm colours in the foreground and cold colours in the background. Warm colours naturally like pop. Cool.
This is already a pretty developed concept for World 5, and it's exploring how to represent the key time behavior of World 5, which is that you can create a parallel universe where your shadow self goes out and does horrible deeds on your behalf, or nice things. Here we see Tim jumping across a gap, and then not depicted as he rewinds, and then the shadow goes and jumps across the gap and jumps and kills this little creature. I guess this idea was that we could replace the background with a kind of screen and then project a lot of light. You see the light shining, and then the shadow world would just be the shadow. So it's pretty straightforward. We ended up doing something in a way more subtle that wouldn't replace the entire background, but it's kind of a neat idea.
And it is very you to want a shadow world.
Is it? I resent that. I think also there's I like playing with theatrical motifs for some reason. So there are these hanging curtains. I think with the lights look like theatrical stage lights maybe, and then the what's it called when you have like shadow puppets?
Isn't it just called shadow puppets?
Yeah. I
Yeah,
think so.
I think that's called shadow puppet.
This is just showing the visual development of World 5. I guess this earliest one does look the most like some piers, like a pier you would walk down, some weird sheet metal that's used a bit unrealistically. I do like the colors here. I like that light blue that's combined with the brown and the red. As it progresses, there's more detail. There's more of these home interior things like the rugs and the pillows, which we talk about elsewhere. And then the background becomes more light, first of all, more value difference, and more fragmented, more abstracted. I think I drew this because I just like this moment in the game so much. It's not that useful as far as the game development, except that it got me imaginatively involved in this scene. But actually, there's not much I did in the game to enhance the scene beyond just building the scenery around it. I mean, it's a very memorable moment because of how you solve this puzzle and the way it feels and what it makes you think about. But really, like, the environment design doesn't support it in any particularly overt way. It's kind of understated. But I did want to explore this moment and show the emotion of how it might feel as Tim to receive this treasure, this key, from yourself as your shadow self is falling to his death. This is a weird one. I'm not really sure when it was made.
that's cool.
It has this kind of red clay look,
More three-dimensional.
similar to the last concept with the shadow key handoff. There's a lift. I mean, there's certainly like moving platforms and lifts in the game, but yeah, I don't know. It's just kind of a weird oddity. These are really cool to me because I can see they're World 6. We're into a very advanced state of human development, of like very elaborate architecture that's way beyond functional. It's highly decorative,
So we've got red background.
but it
blue
looks nothing
foreground.
like World 6, at least at first. This one with a hideous green and purple, actually I had to dig into a PSD to find it. I had not saved it out into a JPEG. I probably never showed it to John. It was just a thing I went through when I was getting to something else. Really weird colors. I like a lot this one with the blue backdrop, although we normally try to go for stronger contrast and more color difference between foreground and background.
And it's not imposing to me.
True, it's really not imposing. It doesn't have the right tone for World 6. It's actually kind of like a Zora domain or something. It feels like aquatic and relaxing even.
I would hang out there. I wouldn't hang out in any of these other screens.
Yeah. Some of these later ones go in a darker direction, and you can see some of the elements that are going to show up in World 6, like the costumes, the figures in these kind of archways. Again, I like these because they're unlike what's in the game, but I'm exploring different motifs and different decorative patterns and rhythms. I have to say I'm less in my element doing architecture, but I'm trying to find elements that I can repurpose. And Braid brings its own challenges because the physical shapes of the foreground and the solid objects within the scene get smaller and smaller compared to World 2, which has like a large ground area where you can do a lot of grass and rocks that fade to darkness. Here, I'm making things that are smaller that have to fit together with enough structural coherency to at least look like platforms and walls and stuff. But I'm trying to find decorative motifs that support the atmosphere. Here I see a lot of the same architectural elements. I'm copying pasting from the other concepts, and this is based on a actual level layout. There's some additional stuff, but I recognize this area from World 6.
Yeah.
Again, they're moving platforms that have animals on them. This didn't show up in the game. It still has this blue kind of aquatic feeling thing, but also kind of marble, maybe like a Roman influence, but just kind of weird. We're seeing more of these figures in the back. They're in robes. That one looks like Orko from He-Man. We're getting closer and closer to the final look. It's much darker. That's the biggest change. And we have these kind of lurid color lights illuminating these statues, which are costumes or social roles without any humans inside. We have a kind of marble foreground with a lot of detailed carvings that have an organic feeling. Again, I'm more comfortable doing organic stuff, but also there was a concept of trying to underscore the progression towards artificial structures by, in fact, using organic motifs. But we've been in a forest, we've been in the plains and the hills, and now those things are kind of a memory depicted in this artificial form. More and more development of the architectural elements. It's a bit awkward for me because I'm trying to make things that are modular, that'll fit into the available space, which is often pretty small. But I'm using kind of arch motif and these funny tracks that are gonna maybe have lights on them. The foregrounds become really white. Since the background is dark, we can have a really white foreground for strong contrast there. But I'm trying to keep some color in and trying to figure out how to use color. So actually there's a lot of different kind of almost pastel colors present. I think I remained ambivalent about the colors in this world until the end. I can tell from the elements in here that I'm pretty far along in developing the art for World 6, but I'm second guessing myself on the color palette. In particular, the background. We have a white kind of marble foreground, but the background, I wasn't sure I liked what I was working with, which was like red lights and red and blue, but I wasn't sure how to balance that. I do like some of these backgrounds that go more towards amber or ochre or like orangey lights. Feels maybe a little bit too much like the title screen, like the city in the title screen, and we're not looking at that city exactly. We have to be in another place. I can see I'm playing with blues, teals, and purples also, which, again, is interesting. We got back to that much later, but that's not what we did in the original game.
Oh, that's really cool. Yeah. Another designer, Tim. He's looking more and more like the final version. Also, dropping the ring is a different symbol as well, I think. Cool.
This is a concept for World 1, and it's the final confrontation, climax of the game. I remember John specifically saying we wanted to avoid, like, after seeing this, we don't want it to feel like Mordor, which I agree with. This stonework, it's very organic, it's not very logical. It looks like teeth or like a jaw. And I noticed what looks like a, kind of a Romeo and Juliet balcony, which is apt. And the blue sky, like things emerging from this blue haze. I don't know. I guess that blue is always very powerful to me. Like, it's an uncanny blue because blue is the conventional sky color that is generally comforting and normal. And this is a kind of a rich blue that it's a pretty blue, but it's kind of like a stalking blue or a sulking blue or something. And the way the scenery fades back into it does not really feel normal. It's a kind of like oblivion blue or something. I like this one. It's exciting to
cool.
me, and it has a strong resemblance to the game. So I feel like this was
Looks like it's in
actually
the witness.
a very useful piece of concept art to do, although unusual for us to do this sort of perspective, which is unlike the game. The palette is all here, the kind of sense of wild gesture coming off of the forms, the green spiky bushes with the dark interiors and the little shocks of red or orange, kind of progressing towards this order on the right side with the house up on the cliff. All of this chaos and energy compressing into a kind of unnatural order that you can't quite trust or believe in. This is just an oddity I dug up. I don't know why I did this. I guess I'm just trying to think about the feeling that we're trying to capture in the end. This doesn't look like anything in the game. This is where Tim hopes to finally encounter the princess. Is she going to come out onto that balcony and look down at him? Will she let down her hair? What kind of story are we in? What's in there? This is not a house from my life. This is a made-up house. But you know what I think of? I kind of feel like I was anticipating moving to the Bay Area, which I did halfway through working on Braid. I'd gone to San Francisco already and met John and attended GDC, and I was really excited about the whole game industry world, and the Bay Area was so beautiful. And since moving there, in fact, years after moving there, I remember walking around Diamond Heights, maybe Noe Valley-ish, Glen Park-ish, and seeing houses up on cliffs that look just like this. So, I don't know. I was trying to put some of that Bay Area feeling into it. It's really the counterpart to the title screen on the bridge. It's the far extreme opposite end of the line. This is where you're trying to get to. And so I wanted to, as kind of a sibling to that, give a sense of video gamey linear progression that terminates, and just the way the bridge is the beginning of moving forward, that line, that stripe across the screen. This house is just kind of like a station, like a train station or something. It's the end of the line, and it's kind of interesting to see it take form from this boxier version, getting larger, but also at one point getting these swoops and curves, which I moved away from towards this angular version with the roof kind of dented in the middle. I guess there are like homes around the Bay Area that have this funny nautical look with like the railings, like the balcony there. I haven't thought a lot about like, okay, the princess is rich, but I guess that's just because she's a princess. But if we wanted to contradict that princess fantasy image further, she could be in a more modest home. But I guess she's in like an expensive house that would be the equivalent of a castle.
The San Francisco equivalent of a castle.
Yeah. So maybe she is a princess. We don't know for sure that she's not a princess.
It looks like it has one of those back entrances that's like, you know, when you're driving on a road and all you see is like maybe a garage and like the rest of it's built under. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? It kind of reminds me of that, which I've only seen in the Bay Area.
Yeah, these designs are so cool. Yeah, he's got that pattern again. It must be the brush he uses. It creates this grain effect on top. But it's not present everywhere. Alright, we're up here now. Alright, so we can't get up there. in here. Oh no, what's to the right there? Go check that in a sec. Do we have anything else?
This is really horny, and Tim's making out with his girlfriend, I guess.
Cool.
But he's making a mistake because he's, kind of entangled at the moment, and they're drinking wine, and he reaches up for his wine glass, but he's knocking over the bottle. This world is about forgiveness, and mistakes can be repaired or undone. Yeah, like no pain really has to stay with you. You can roll back the tape.
So the idea here is that Tim's already sort of thinking about like the small mistakes he made. Perhaps he's doing that thing that one does when obsessing over their past, where they're trying to find like that tiny mistake they could have fixed.
Yeah, I think so. I think he's maybe obsessing over small mistakes, or I think there's also a way that, this clumsy mistake of knocking over the bottle is like kind of physical misstep you take in the game, falling on some spikes or something like that. But of course, the whole context of considering a relationship really makes you see those things as metaphorical for like emotional hurt and being able to quickly repair and kind of move past a kind of insult or injury or feeling of abandonment or whatever may come up, as opposed to letting those things accrue into a sense of like sustained threat or something else that could really be alienating. The new version is very faithful to the old one, but many parts look really close. There is a lot more detail, even in like the bottle itself has a better cylindrical shape, with reflections and the wine inside. Tim's face has a lot more detail. There's a compositional
Tim's hair is
assist
different
coming
colour.
from the branches above, guiding your eye more towards the center, the bright area in the center where the action's happening. I've also managed the values a lot better. In the first version, to make his hand stand out, the hand is bright, so I put darker things behind it, but that really doesn't make any sense in the scene and kind of defeats the sense of depth you get with this bright atmosphere in the background. So I think like the management of values is a lot more logical. In World 3, we still have overall a sense of safety, but there's something beckoning Tim away into a realm of magic, maybe of danger eventually. But here we see him still kind of surrounded by friendly people, raising his glass with others in some kind of toast, I guess. It looks like a safe situation, although he's withdrawing in his mind. His eyes are closed. He's probably tipsy. The window behind him is calling out. The golden light is kind of suffusing into him, and it's almost like he's fading back out of his present situation.
Why are his eyes closed?
He's going into some kind of inner state. He's not totally present with everybody there. He's participating. He's raising his glass for the toast, but he's, well, we don't know that it's a toast. I see one person doesn't. Oh, that's in the new version.
Yeah.
Well, in the new version, not everybody is toasting. We don't know why. But I think that was a compositional thing I added to make more sense of the hand being there. But yeah, it's funny. He really looks like he's toasting and someone beside him is gesticulating. But yeah, he's definitely kind of withdrawn. He's in his own world at the same time. So he's kind of in two places. The main thing I'm noticing again is better management of values. A lot like in the second painting, Tim is bright. In this case, his face is bright. To make that stand out, I put something dark behind it, but that's really, even more than in the painting for World 2, this strategy of putting something dark behind Tim is really working against the atmosphere of the scene, because that window needs to be really bright to feel like it's calling him in. So I think this is a case where values are really important, like a really bright window hitting the side of his face, hitting the contour of his sleeve, and like hitting that wine glass. Yeah, I think the old version is really unsuccessful in that sense. There's a much better sense of depth now, like the hand and the glass seem to hover in space, almost like 3D coming out at you. You know, if you were to judge the distance from his hand to his face, it looks like a huge distance, like he's way back there, because he's really in his mind kind of going out the window already. World 4 is about time being related to your position in space. And in the story, Tim has gone back to his childhood home
Oh, someone climbed out the
and
window.
therefore is immersed in old thoughts and feelings and reminiscences of his youth. So here's a childhood bedroom full of tokens of his youthful interests and hobbies. The figure in the doorway, who's, you know, presumably a parent, maybe saying goodnight and turning off the light, or maybe entering. We're not sure. There's one creepy detail here, and I won't exactly point you to it, but I'll say that every painting has some hint of the presence of the princess, maybe just out of view or just barely entering.
First thing I'm noticing is that you've incorporated the rocking horse from the level.
That's true.
Oh,
I think that's the major point here, that the rocking horse from World 4 now appears in this room. I mean, and in fact, like, I think that's a kind of reciprocity, because a lot of the new objects in World 4, scenery objects, are things that are like childhood playthings taken from this scene, or at least inspired by this scene. So it's trying to strengthen the connection a little bit between the painting and World 4.
So there's also a pretty big change to the composition, I'd say, of the bed.
I think the perspective is working a lot better here, and there's a much improved sense of depth. And partially that's achieved by fixing the perspective and like being more intentional about where those perspective lines are going. And we can now see the full width of the bed, which gives us a much better sense of the space, and also is like a compositional boost because of that dark corner at the bottom right. The bed looks a lot longer. You can really like sense the length of the bed, which is helped by like the intense contrast and saturation at the headboard near us. Really bright red, really heavy dark. And then the distant headboard is a lot more low contrast and kind of faded, so you can sense it's further back in space, which I think like really helps overall. You know, I think when I was working on the original, I probably just enjoyed all of the chaos and clutter, and maybe even felt like if it was more adherent to traditional perspective, that would be compromised. But I don't feel that way. I think I'm very comfortable with the changes to the new one. I think the scene works better, in fact. World 5 is about a decision to stay or to go, and the duality of the world is the mashup of
Oh, that's
comfortable
also him
interior
walking away in the background.
home things and an unpleasant outside environment. So the theme here is travel, and Tim is on his way somewhere. He
You've
doesn't
got
look
two
too
Tims.
happy. He looks kind of ghostly and isolated, actually.
Is that a princess
He
to
doesn't
revive
have
him?
any relation to the people behind him. Though we sense, I mean, it's easier to spot the princess in this one. The Tim in the background looks like he's following the princess, so I think there's two possibilities for Tim here. His expression's changed a bit. I think you can read into that what you like. I think I wasn't trying to change that. Maybe there's more ambiguity in his mouth, but his eyes are more present, which I think gives him more presence overall, compared to the sunken dark Tim whose eyes are hidden. What I know about World 6 is that it is about the slow down ring, about the ring that makes people hesitant to approach Tim, and about a feeling of chilly distance and kind of being lost in all the social roles and contrivances and manners of social life, feeling alienated from some essence, I guess, or from some authenticity. And so here we see Tim in the heart of the city. You know, we've gone from like a pastoral scene in the beginning through various locations, and now we're just in this wintry city with the buildings towering overhead and neon lights and figures in the distance, quite remote from Tim, while he's gazing at this trash pile, which for some reason has a glowing ring. I mean, I guess I'm just describing what's really obvious, but I think I always wanted this one to be kind of looking up, but in the first
More of a-
version, it's more of a tilted feeling, like a Dutch angle or something.
Yeah.
just by
More
managing
sharp
their
angles.
perspective better. Yeah, you can see the buildings rising up overhead. You get more of that sense of like vertiginous space above him, the atmosphere, and again, like I'm managing the values better. So whereas the first one is very murky, now it's a lot more organized, and you can tell, you get a sense of the space behind him, even though we are drawn into this relationship between Tim and the ring that he's looking at. We basically have early World 2 versions that show other possibilities of Tim and the princess with the wine or with their picnic or whatever. And in every case, there's some mistake occurring, like he's knocking over the bottle or he's getting stung by an insect, or I guess is that a mistake or is that just like an assault?
Well, it might be why you changed it, right? Because it's
Yeah.
like, well, you didn't have control over being stung.
Yeah.
I mean, is this here, the car, is that possibly a World 2 one?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, the car's broken down, but the couple is harmonious and they're trying to fix it, you know? So they may be stuck by the roadside. There's a cactus. When you see a cactus, you know you're stuck somewhere. There's one reference to a braid in the text somewhere. I think it describes a princess turning her head in her braid, like dancing and, I don't know, with some attitude or something like that, with dismissal or disdain or something like that. But anyway, yeah, there's no other presence of a actual braid. So this is, I mean, I like this. It's pretty developed for a rough painting. It feels like it's halfway done or so. Could have been one of the paintings. It's the file name says World 4 Aloof, but I don't really remember my thinking about this except for it's a gaze of a, I don't know if I want to say male gaze or what, but it's like a desiring gaze or kind of idealizing gaze that's like fixating on some of her physical features. There's a sense of infatuation, I think, like the light hitting her hair. The arm is like a porcelain arm. There's like a sense of perfection about it. It's kind of strange. Yeah, I think it's just a kind of indelible image of like a infatuated kind of viewpoint of somebody idealizing. But she's not looking, so she's not looking at us. So it's definitely a kind of desiring look, but we don't know whether there's any relationship here or how she would look back, or, you know, are we projecting something because we don't really see her face, so we don't know anything about her, but we know there's something captivating, at least from our perspective.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, why does he have black hair in the first one? The pictures are more wider as well. Are they? No, they're not. No. They're just side by sides. More of a tonal range there. More darks, more lights. These are really cool as well. Oh, cool. Really cool drawings. Yeah, the perspective is a bit dodgy there. The anatomy is quite dodgy. And then window, like this weird perspective on that. Oh, that's quite cool. That's cool perspective. Is he getting drunk at a pub there or something? Top level canvas lacking something. Fixed bowl shape. Wine glass tipping. Clarify what's going on here. Change shell colour for better contrast. ERD's his own notes. Chair back look weird. Improved lighting coming from window. Improved wallpaper distortion. Why does Tim look like a different guy in each of these? Style is inconsistent, but not intentionally so. Bring them into line with each other, or intentionally go for very different styles. Style is different in this one, and it's kind of boring overall. Viewer plane is unconvincing. Can see the ground. Oh yeah. Highlight on top of chairs. Building facade looks wobbly and bad. Add more smaller impressionistic signage. Lower perspective to increase vertinosity. Vertiness, whatever, of city walls. Fixed wall, brick pan, and perspective. Yeah, perspective is a bit hard on that. Contours and softness of bed sheets. Atmospheric perspective on bed. Pushback. Rear part behind. Planes. Ah, cool. Oh, there's a way out here as well. Let's go up. Can't go up there either. The particles.
These doodles are me thinking through how to structure the particles, like how to define the different types we would need, or how they should move in each case. In fact, a lot of these specifically relate to the sun, which exists in World 2 and is the primary weather effect that is helping to illustrate the rewind behavior. So when you rewind, the rays go back into the sun. And yeah, I'm just breaking it down and figuring out how to do a painting out of all these little parts that would work together. What kind of brush strokes am I going to need for this painting, and how are they all going to move? In World 6, your time power is the slow ring, so you can drop a ring and slow down time in its radius. This was an idea that as the rain falls, the individual raindrops, which are kind of streaking by quickly normally, would be visible as individual hovering beads of water. This was not included. It was not really feasible to handle each individual drop of rain with the slowdown ring. In fact, World 6 has snow, not rain. The snow is affected by the slowdown ring, so you can kind of see it slow down and collect near the ring, whereas elsewhere it's falling much faster.
Yeah, really cool. That's a good texture brush going on there. Cool. Got a lot more stuff here. Can we go in here? Oh, interesting. How'd you get back out? Oh, he's kind of stuck. Cool little design. Platforms and cannons.
You know, how do you make something that looks like you could pass through from the bottom but stand on top? That's not really a thing that exists in reality. I remember John's direction was something like it should look permeable from one side but less from the other. So I was trying different shapes that maybe are have gaps on one side but grow tighter together on the other, or like a beam of some kind that's thick on the top with like a second beam that's more broken up beneath. Well, there are three types of cannons in Braid, which appear throughout the worlds. And they're the kind of normal cannonball firing cannons, the monster firing cannons, and the cloud emitting cannons. And they need to be visually distinct at a glance. so you can anticipate what's going to happen. So they all need a different design. And so this shows exploration of the cannon design. I do like these three that are kind of carved with the one looks like a beast and one looks like a spark and the final one has clouds. I actually like those a lot, but they're not particularly cannon-like, really. There's actually a specific shape you just associated iconographically with cannons, and actually none of these really look like that. The final ones do a lot more. And they're also all the same color, which makes them less easy to recognize. We're including this just because it has a funny drawing of Tim getting hit with the fireball. These show the structure of the cloud platforms that come out of the cloud cannons and how we're thinking about assembling them from particles and parts that would move and add up to a cloud. And it has a platform on top. It's got a place you can stand on, and then below it's got the turning cloud bits. The moving platforms that you activate with switches are a recurring element in many of the puzzles throughout the game. And here I'm exploring various looks for them. I think they're fun to look at, some of these more high-tech ones with the different colored lights and everything. What's in the game is a lot more straightforward. Yeah, here's some fun different ideas for what the floating platforms could look like. I don't know, what do you think, Frank? What are these like to you?
Well, I mean, like, you know, it's kind of fun seeing like the one with the wheel, which I mean could never work because there's not always ground under these platforms.
That's a
right?
good point. Those are really popular now, though. I see people on those all the time.
That's true. Yeah, that is. What is this like one with the cloud coming out of it, like a steampunky kind of looking one? Yeah.
It looks like it's got an engine on it, kind of going pop, 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 like outputting exhaust, actually. But that's probably be too noisy and mess up the soundtrack.
Yeah.
Then there's these other ones that are very unlike, don't look so mechanical, that have a kind of like the one that's a mouse. Looks like a metronome or something.
They remind me of railroad switches.
Oh yeah, that's true. We're getting closer to the final design of the switches, but these are some variants, and I kind of like them.
Cool. Let's take a look at them again. Got like animation going on here. Cool. That can design's really good. The rendering is really good. That's crazy good. Oh, shows you how the cloud's actually made. Cool. Counters.
Here's the boss monster, and you can see Edmund McMillan's design. It's great, and he's got a lot of personality prowling around. But yeah, after I'd done so much of the environment art, it was clear there was some like lack of cohesion, so I ended up repainting all this stuff. A lot of cases, the designs stay very faithful to Edmund's. In other cases, the designs change, like Tim, but the way he moves is very much Edmund's animation design. This boss monster remains a kind of furry brown creature, but is structured differently with totally redone animation. I did try some digressions from this idea. It's fun to look at these alternate designs. They all have the helmet or the horns that are going to break off when Tim attacks.
5 looks like a Furby.
5 looks like a freaking Furby. He's like a bondage Furby. It's a bit grotesque and weird, but I like the little blue gremlin thing with the hand cannon.
I like that there's almost a birthday candle look to some of these.
Yeah. And here we can see the breakdown of the creature in terms of how he's structured and the different parts that work together, like the feet, the cape and its different parts, and the expressions made up of mouth shapes and eye shapes and everything. The greeter is very much Edmund's design, and that didn't change very much. Although I did attempt some alternatives. Some of these just kind of smooth him out a little bit, making him look like a slightly different stuffed animal. In other cases, he has this sort of goatee and a patched vest or beard. I don't know. I do like these, but we stuck with the maybe more innocent, youthful-looking version.
Derpy is the word I get.
Very derpy. We're looking at the bunny rabbit called the Mimic, and this also stays really close to Edmund's design. But the bunny rabbit is cute at first, but then it attacks. So here I'm trying some new attack expressions that are a bit more terrifying. I guess this is like a pretty overused trope now, like the cute plush animal that then has like big teeth. So that was a little too far, little much. But I do like this weird one that's like a little white critter with the dirt and the grass and the flower on its head.
You revised this thing 30 times more than anything else in the game.
Yeah, there's a million designs for the monster, but we're not even in range yet. This is like very early, broad exploration. I'm kind of going in another direction. But I mean, the monsters show up a lot. They're like the most common enemy type. They're the most basic type, and you just jump on them and dispatch them. And they're, they're trampolines. There's a lot of ways to visualize like the basic monster.
Was there a notion maybe of like changing them throughout the game?
Oh, having them change from...
Yeah.
That rings a bell. I feel like that probably did come up, but I guess there's so many of them. Often there are many on one screen. Maybe that was more the issue, that John liked to avoid repetition. And if you have a lot of them on the screen, it feels less handmade. But we didn't quite manage that. The version John had done was like a lumpy yellow thing. We'll see that later, actually. And Edmund had drawn like a furry brown guy, but I'm just trying other directions. Like, I don't even know if John wanted me to, but I was just exploring the fundamental monster type. I guess one thing I was thinking about was trying to represent better the kind of way you interact with the creature, which is that it's dangerous from the side or the bottom, but you can jump on it from above. So I did this spiky guy with a green bald head, which I sort of like. I mean, it is a lot clearer, Yeah. Oh, this one looks like Overeducated Jampot from A Lesson Is Learned, but the damage is irreversible. Oh, I like this blue guy in the trousers with his face looking up, like he really wants you to jump on his face. I also like this one getting crushed. I guess thinking about like, realistic Mario, like if you're jumping on these things, they're just, suffering and dying.
I think there were about 40,000 webcomics depicting
That's true.
Realistic Goomba stomping.
That's true. Just riding the zeitgeist. And you can see on the left there's this yellow lumpy one, and that looks a lot like John's programmer art version. And then we have others that are like more brown furry that look like Edmund's version. And then I just went crazy with a bunch of funny faces.
And you can still see Edmonds on this screen.
Yeah, you can see Edmund's back there in the screenshot. It's a little bit faded back, but yeah, there he is. I found animations in progress using Phase 1. So I think I was working on that and got kind of far with it. I don't remember how long it was in the game or anything. Yeah, I guess my first instinct was to do something a little bit haunted looking with a sense of doubt or a little bit of a homely feeling to it. But I remember that John wanted him to be, I don't know, like a little more appealing, I think was the direction. But again, I tried many things. It's funny how like you change just a small thing and it can really alter the impression when you're working at this scale.
What's 30 about?
But then some of these are just kind of silly. I think what I noticed about that is how much his posture's changed. Like he's leaning back a lot. And that's the sort of thing that can really change your perception of the animation. And sometimes like disrupt your sense of the motion. I don't do tons of animation, but that's my impression that like characters that are more compact and kind of have a more consistent, like maybe upright, even posture are just easier to track in a game like this when they're small, They feel solid and consistent and predictable. There's also a frame in the bottom right where he's got his hand down. He's sort of jumping, looking forward with his head tilted down, and his front hand is down, and that's looks like he's vaulting over a fence or something, or maybe vaulting off a monster. But it's just a single frame. And I guess the idea was to do like a bad version of like an anime Tim. Doesn't look like anime at all, but like how Western characters that are ugly to Japanese sensibilities, like Crash Bandicoot, get big eye makeovers and look more sort of youthful and everything. So that was the idea here. Here I'm beginning to develop some new animations. Tim in his turning towards the door pose, and Tim in his World 5 when the shadow was waiting for the new Tim to do something. But he's kind of hanging his head down and his arms down like he's incapacitated or something. I just like seeing the drawings in this rough state alongside the finished poses.
That pose was always really creepy to me.
Yeah?
Just the shadow, it's the end of the shadow's life is when that pose comes in.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, it's after the shadow has completed its moveset that you recorded. It just stops and does that. And it's like, it's kind of this creepy, like, oh, is the shadow thing, like, dying now?
Right, right.
Yeah. So that was always a really creepy one for me.
Yeah, that was cool. Poster art.
You know, an hourglass is a pretty obvious symbolic object. It's time, but it's like got a sense of cozy antiquity. It's like has a sense of craftsmanship to it, which is a kind of handmade feeling. You know, there are other ways to represent time that might be like more mechanistic or mechanical or something. But I guess I wanted to
Yeah,
show
this poster is really fucking cool.
destruction and a kind of fanciful creation all at once. So we're smashing the glass, so the glass has been broken, and there's a danger to it with these shards of glass. But the sand pouring out is becoming a castle, and castles obviously figure in the game. That's very fanciful. So there's romanticism here. There's some hope, but also like a destructive aspect. This is a little comic strip I made for the Braid website when it launched. When we were just looking for a concise, approachable way to tell people what the game was like. And a lot of these statements are things I'd heard John say, or maybe he wrote the script. I really don't remember now. I kind of feel like I wrote it, but I'm not 100% sure. But these are the things he was talking about that I absorbed. And, you know, I like these values, that the game treats your time and attention as precious, that there's no filler, and that it strives to be mind expanding and worthwhile. I was working on this logo for the game. It wasn't used, but I kind of like it.
Like all new
I guess it's just a few variants on this idea of it kind of looks like a feather blowing around or something. I don't know, is that too like Forrest Gump or something like that? I'm not sure it's the exact right association, but it does have I like the tone of it. It looks like a fantasy thing, and it's got this playful motion throughout.
Cool. I like the perspective on that as well. That's so cool. As before, that's when he finalised it. Still got the painterly brushstrokes on it, but it's like more finalised, like more detail. Yeah, that's good. That's so good. It's quite a basic logo actually. I like the glow effect on it though. Remastering.
Now when we're working on the remaster, thinking about how to improve and update the game, and we're exploring alternatives for background scenery. This is in the realm of way too disruptive, way too divergent from the original vision. We have like this careful progression of like more and more structures, more and more plants, and it's like building the atmosphere in a particular way. And here there's just tons of these like weird, big, ungainly structures that don't quite resemble anything else, really. This was teaching us we don't want to do this. We're going to try to only add things where there's a clear benefit and it's not altering the original intention. In the remaster, we added new animation transitions. So when Tim is falling and lands, he doesn't go instantly from his falling animation to standing or walking. He'll actually crouch and kind of transition into walking. Or when he jumps and grabs a ladder, he'll smoothly transition from jumping to turning and putting his hand on the ladder. And yeah, it's more fluid, it feels nicer and looks more polished. But there was a lot of thinking to do to figure out when these animations would fire correctly and transition correctly into the various possible ins and outs from this sort of thing. So this is just showing my thought process, trying to put that in order and account for every scenario. This is just a bunch of Tim's frames stacked together with different colors, and I'm not sure why. But sometimes stuff like this bubbles up in development. It just looks cool. This is an area in World 2, painting over and kind of exploring how I would repaint. I mean, really, I was a lot more conservative in the final version. This is going towards a reinterpretation, like changing the character of the rocks. I mean, I started off asking myself, can I do a much better job, and what would that look like? Again, this is another thing where we decided it wasn't a good idea to go this far. This is another paint over of an old screen, trying to dial in the look of the new version. This is a more successful one in that it's not adding something decorative that doesn't belong, and it's not changing the character of familiar elements, but it's trying to improve legibility, to better manage brightness and darkness, to help you perceive at a glance or when you're squinting the shape of the play area where you can and can't go. And this is a particular area of the original game where that's not clear at all, actually, where there's bright stuff and dark stuff, and if you squint, it kind of all falls apart. So the final game doesn't look exactly like this because this was just a mock-up, but this was helpful in us clarifying our goals. This is a comic strip I made at some point while working on the remaster, which is self-explanatory. Here's a sketch page considering updates to the puzzle areas, which in every case we redesigned, redecorated to add some more character, supporting the existing themes and mood of their respective worlds.
So, I mean, there's text here saying that a spaceship wouldn't make sense in the ancient setting, but you did end up using a rocket.
That's true. So yeah, the text here, I guess, is reflecting my thinking at the time, but I didn't follow this. We did include a spaceship. I think actually John had a little hesitation about the spaceship, but then time passed and he was okay with it. This is another sort of weird artifact. This is how the file preview looks, but what it is a frame stack of a cloud growing and breaking up, starting very small in the center, growing outward into a round, puffy shape, and then fragmenting into individual shapes going outward from the center while there's sort of a space growing between them. When you look at all the frames together, it looks like this weird, I don't know, bumpy, horny rock or something. In the remaster, I wanted to add more effects to show Tim's interaction with the world and his movement. So when you run along, there's dust kicked up. When you jump in a wet place, you see a little splash of water. And when you're on the clouds, you see clouds move under your feet. So I was just doing some sketches to think about how that might look, how they might move. What this shows is a process of applying a dry brush filter, which cleans up all the fuzziness and looks half acceptable, and then painting over a large percentage of the image. Some parts look okay and can be left as they are. In this case, it's the darker areas really don't need much attention, but a lot of it I touched up again. I don't remember if I thought this was an original idea at the time, because we definitely thought about this in the old version. But here I'm exploring for the remaster the idea of having a glimpse of the world beyond that you're going towards when you're on these cloud screens. This would have required, drawing landscapes for each world. And I think it's still a nice idea, but I'm pretty sure the problem was it conflicts with the text that comes out of the books. This is a paint over and radical redesign of the boss layer in World 3. I've completely changed the palette, the materials, and everything. It's weird to look at because it seems like such an obviously bad idea, but I'm pretty sure I was sincere at the time. I don't feel like I have like excessive respect or reverence for like the previous work. I mean, it's a product of our thought process at the time, and yet I guess doing this exercise gave me a lot more respect. I just realized that it's senseless to kind of like reinterpret it so deeply. I mean, I just didn't feel like there was any possibility that it would be a clear benefit. It would just be a weirdly different thing. Here's another paint over of a familiar scene. This is World 3. This is the beginning of the really long world that you run through with the rabbits chasing you. Another pretty radical redesign with a more jungly aesthetic. I mean, I think it looks kind of cool. I was using these rough brushes that have a lot of character. I do like the big dramatic shape in the background. It's, but again, it makes me ask, why bother? Like, what is this? It's so destructive of the old version. It just feels silly and senseless. Like, it's a jungle now, so how does that sit in relation to everything else in the game? What does that mean for the other worlds? Is everything going to change now to make these relationships feel proportional and appropriate? What does this mean? It's a very strange thing to do. And then also that the big tree in the back, while cool, is a lot more intense, wild, and kind of writhing than
Looks more
what's in
violent.
the original game. So it's just tonally very out of control. So I don't know, it might have been interesting to redo the whole game like this, but I think it would be just a very confusing thing that would probably confuse everybody about the original game too. And here's a paint over of World 6, considering more dramatic changes. It's definitely in keeping with World 6. You might say it's faithful to the original intention of World 6. I like the idea of ice sculptures that swan up there. Any one of these things would displace something that was already there, and we just ended up taking a more conservative approach that would feel like the right thing to do. Having decided to change the background color in World 6, here I'm just exploring variants of that. The first one is faithful to the original. It's blue and red, and a gray that reads as yellow. I'm trying to take it towards teal instead of blue, and then variants of purple, kind of compressing things towards purple. But yeah, I guess ultimately it's got purple and a lot more orange light, but hangs together a lot better than the new one, I think. I actually really like this, and I kind of wish I'd done these. Yeah, like there are a lot more theatrical motifs here, the faces and all of this. I think it's kind of cool, but yeah, this isn't in the game. Sorry. Maybe in 2038 or something.
It'll be in Braid 2.
Here I'm just thinking about World 6 stuff, and in particular how to break it down into more parallax layers. That weird tree thing, carnivalesque tree thing, I forget what we were calling it. The branches, if you like, are now all broken up to parallax layers, so I'm thinking through where I can break them so that when they scroll horizontally against each other, they'll look like they're still attached. At some point, to project how much work lay ahead, I screenshotted the whole game and made these sorts of annotations to kind of indicate where I wanted to make changes. I'm using different color inks to indicate whether I'm trying to fix something that's like awkward or unclear or the wrong level of detail, or in fact an opportunity to redesign. Here's some things that look like almost finished assets that just didn't go in. I had the idea to make these neon signs which appear in the puzzle painting and kind of fill the space back there with these neon signs. And I like the idea. Actually, I have some regret that I didn't manage to do this. I do think there was one problem with that, which is they would have conflicted with the other stuff that's back there, which are those sort of carnivalesque tree things, which I think only appear in one other place, so didn't really want to strip them out, but I like this idea.
Cool. Let's take a look. Yeah, that is cool. I like that. That's like a poster right there. What's going on with Tim? Just a random paint over. R shows poses different enough to present a choice about which pose to transition from, or a maximalist approach to justify their own transition. Yeah, this one's cool. Dry brush. What do you mean by dry brush? So this is the original small JPEG or PNG. Then times 4 one, he basically on the right there shows you he increased the canvas size for the image, and then he applied a dry filter. I suppose when it went up to the big scaled up, it was blurry. Then times 4 dry brush filter plus paint over, and that's the paint over stuff there that you put on top. So yeah, he's cleaned up. On a smaller version you don't really need that, but since you're large in resolution you have to clean up. Face flop scaling, fix awkward areas. Backgrounds, unique set pieces. Okay, yeah, you can see it. Custom foreground shapes. Big but selective changes. Same idea, new painting. Contact, which is the old ones, and which ones are the new ones. Totally different. Yeah, those are totally different, yeah. Cool. The castle.
This is the first castle I did. I noticed early on I had this idea of a long wall approaching the castle, so you'd walk in front of this long wall. I guess that makes it feel very defended, and maybe that was not the right atmosphere. There's not that much threat here. But the form evolves into like a gardeny castle with planted flowers and a bench for sitting and a little courtyard and stairs winding up. Yeah, this is the most inviting castle in the game because World 2 is about optimism and hope. Nothing's gone wrong yet, particularly. The first one, I guess, was the looks the most like a tree with a roof on top of it. It looks the most like the World 2 castle. In fact, there's a moat. Something I noticed about the moat in both cases is that it runs in a way that you don't actually see the gap. It's not very like native to 2D platformer presentation, so that changed. But the later versions do have like a gap that you cross over. It goes more towards fantastical and whimsical and strange shapes. Kind of looks like a frog crouching or leaping even.
I mean, like, is it the Baba Yaga that has a house with legs? Right?
Yeah, chicken legs.
Yeah, that's what I'm kind of seeing on the upper right one.
That's cool. I like that. I guess it doesn't look that big. You know, it developed later into like something really big with a bunch of structures. World 3 is supposed to feel more weird by the end. Not too dangerous, but definitely a little weird, definitely magical. So I think these are probably all playing it a little safe early on. Even though they're strange, they don't have that kind of imposing feeling yet. I guess this evolved into a series of weird warpy towers that are encircling a bonfire or something. It's not clear what the light source is, but there's some eerie light emanating from between them and from within. Yeah, they're kind of twisting as though they were dancing, and they're connected their roofs or their strange what are those called, fronds or something, are connected to each other, like they're like embracing in some kind of exultant dance. I don't know, I'm just making this up, but that's how it looks to me right now. The unique characteristic of fourth castle is that you walk past it, so it can't just be like a large impressive thing in the background that you look at. You actually walk onto it and across it and past it. So it needs a ground plane, and it needs to have a right side that scrolls off screen. I guess these early versions look even more mountainous, like just a big pile of rocks. Maybe that's not enough of a differentiation from all the stuff you've seen before. I think the final version looks more of like an intentional structure. But it's not my favorite castle, even though I do like the painting and the colors. I think it doesn't really feel like a place in the same way. It's, it has a lot of repetition to it. It's just a series of arches and you run past it. So that's why we redesigned it in the remaster. I guess the notable transition here is from something that looks a lot more orderly and put together towards something that looks really smashed up. From the beginning, there's that theme of duality, the two parts of the castle extending towards you with the stained glass windows. And I guess the stairs go up between them as though one is still divided between the two alternatives. Then later, the stained glass windows get larger, but I scale it back again. It's a fun composition, I think, all the weird angles and tilted shapes. In World 5, all the nice house stuff, like the pillows and the cushions and the duvets, are out in the swamp. So this implies something happened. I mean, every time you get to the castle, you're told the princess isn't here and your journey has to continue. But this is the first time the castle looks like there was some violence done to it. So it's increasing the stakes or the sense of tension or the sense of danger, foreboding. This one didn't have as many interesting variants. It seems like I took a pretty direct path from a first draft, which was abandoned, to something that basically went directly into the final version. But you can see from the beginning, I'm thinking about something much larger, more imposing. Actually, the theme of cold
Yeah, I think I would
distance
have
is
preferred it
more
if he
present in this
developed
first
this one a bit
version.
more. I kept it this
Maybe we
stage.
decided that was like too far away. It doesn't feel like you've arrived quite enough. I'm just speculating, but the main feature is the large staircase going up into the distance. I guess this would have been a parallax problem even then. With the simpler implementation of parallax,
Yeah,
it would
that's
have had
true.
to be a lot of different sections to have that staircase move realistically. Good chance that was the determining factor. But then I moved to this alternate version that still looks really big, sprawling and imposing, with more parts than you can even fit on screen or comprehend.
It does kind of feel like it lost something, but I might be just putting my own interpretation on the game. It feels like it lost. Like, I don't mind being in the new one. You know what I mean? Like, but the first one, it's like I'm really hesitant to enter.
Yeah, I guess the first one is cool because yeah, you feel it's much more scary actually, and it really feels like it kind of have that Kafka feeling, like you've traveled all the way to the castle, but you're still not even at the castle. It's still a long walk away. Whereas in the final one, yeah, there you are. You could go right inside and roam through the countless rooms, hearing your footsteps. In Mario, when you get to the end of the stage, you jump on the flagpole. Everybody knows that. In the original version of Braid, I think you go through an arch. There's like a star arch, which is a Kirby thing. Everybody knows that. But in the final version of Braid, you do hit a flagpole, and you raise the flag, which is different in each stage. But here I'm just exploring alternatives. We didn't use any of these, but if you jump up some stairs and ring a bell, but if you jump down to a platform to ring a bell, or run past some wind chimes, or jump on a like service bell that you find on a counter in a shop.
Cool. Yeah, designs are really cool. Pardon me. Yeah, they've been so good to keep if they kept that on in. But I can see how difficult it's been with parallax in the stairs. And you want something that seems a bit closer. It's interesting to see how he layers it up. Like he goes from rough to cleaner. Cool. Alright, what else do we have? I'm gonna have a quick break. My back is killing me. I'll be gone for about 10 minutes maybe. So yeah, see you guys in roughly 10 minutes.